So before I talk about all the bowl games and who won and why I placed them where I did, I just want to say congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs. They won the national championship this year, even though I don't think they should have even been there in the first place, but we'll get to that in a second. Congratulations, we knew they were going to beat TCU. The game is still going on right now as I'm recording this video, but they're winning 38-7 at halftime, and TCU has no chance of winning. And I think the biggest takeaway of this national championship game, for one, TCU is just way outmatched. Georgia is too good. They're too good on the line. Their defense is too good, and TCU just isn't good at anything. They have to run the ball, which they cannot on Georgia. Their pass game isn't that good. Max Duggan has been overrated the entire season, and they are proving that right now. This team is not built to beat Georgia, and they're not built to really beat any of the blue blood programs out there right now. And the biggest comparison you can make is look at TCU playing Michigan, right? Michigan, everyone says that they're blue blood now, but they're not. They let TCU score 51 points on them. That's ridiculous. And I don't even think TCU should have won that game. A lot of missed calls, a lot of terrible things happened. The national championship should have been Ohio State, Michigan again, which I'm also going to get into in a second. But looking at the Natty game, TCU has like an Oklahoma defense. It's literally an Oklahoma defense with a worse offense than Oklahoma. And I do not know how Michigan let them win this game, but they just shouldn't be there. They're overmatched, and they're playing way out of their league. The real national championship to me was Ohio State versus Georgia. That was an amazing game. Both teams were evenly matched, and they played really well. Ohio State just completely embarrassed Georgia in this game, especially through the air. The number one defense, the defense that everyone was talking about, yeah, Georgia's not going to let them score more than 20. They're not going to score more than 30. Ohio State hung 41, and they should have won the game if a dirty hit didn't happen to Ohio State's best player in the end zone. They would have won this game by probably more than 7 points. And just for context on that, Marvin Harrison Jr. had 106 yards in like the first quarter against them. Like, you guys cannot say that he wouldn't have been a difference maker down the stretch. Georgia won by 1. No, they wouldn't have won this game. And for that call, it was 100% a dirty hit. He was leaning to the head or neck area of a defenseless receiver. That's a flag. If you don't want to call targeting, that's unnecessary roughness. Ohio State, first down, 2 or 3 yard line. They would have scored a touchdown as well. And that's just the end of the story. That's it. And honestly, if you put them two together, like full strength, like if Darnell Washington didn't get hurt, if they still had Nolan Smith, and then if Ohio State still had Cade Stover and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Travion Henderson, even though they did not run well, and no one can really run well on Georgia, that's the one thing I will give them, but their pass defense is terrible. And Ohio State exploited that all day and night against that defense. But if it's evenly matched, Ohio State, I think, is the better team. They would have won that game. And another thing, a lot of Georgia-only fans like to say Ohio State was holding the whole game. Georgia was doing the same. We have the same screenshots. I've seen them all over Twitter, all over the internet. So both teams were holding. I'm not going to deny Ohio State was, but Georgia was also doing it too. And my one question to Georgia fans, how do you just let Ohio State, a team with no defense really, and a small pulse in the running game, very one-dimensional, just carve you up like a pumpkin on Halloween? It was literally insane. CJ Stroud played out of his mind. He showed that he probably is the next best quarterback, next to Bryce Young in the draft, and I just feel bad for Ohio State. And that's the reason why I have them in the 4th spot, not the 5th spot. I did not put Alabama above them, because I truly believe if Ohio State played like that against Alabama, they would crush them. And Alabama fans aren't going to be happy about that, but it's just the truth. Your defense is way worse than Georgia's, and your offense is about on par with Georgia's. And if Ohio State played like that, you're going to lose. If they played Georgia, they were going to lose, and it would not have been close. So with that being said, I do have TCU number 2 because they did beat Michigan. So I'm going to keep them up there. Michigan 3 because they beat Ohio State. Ohio State 4. Because they probably should have beaten Georgia and they would have won the national championship because TCU is just awful. Alabama right behind them. They beat the living life out of Kansas State, and that game was not close at all. They came out and they showed who they are, and Alabama's still a really good team, and Kansas State cannot hang with the big boys. Next, after Alabama, I have Tennessee. Tennessee beat Clemson in the Orange Bowl, 31-14. This game I kind of thought would go Clemson's way more than Tennessee, but Tennessee came out, they did their thing. Melton didn't look that bad, and Clemson's defense also did not look that good. So they're staying at that spot. I moved Penn State down 1. They're sitting at the 7th spot, even though they won the Rose Bowl 35-21 over Utah. That was a really good game. I think Penn State played a very complete team, and it's great to see that the Big Ten has 3 really good teams, like top 10 teams, just sitting there. It just sucks that they're all on one side. And then after them, we have Washington. Washington played Texas. They beat Texas, so I had to put them up in the rankings. Even though Texas isn't that good of a team, I still think Washington deserves it. They've had an amazing season so far, and honestly, all the other teams behind them just didn't accomplish too much. Like Tulane, they beat USC by 1 point, which USC, I get, their defense is non-existent. Lincoln Riley, we know, he doesn't know what defense is, but their offense is still really good. They had Caleb Williams. They were missing a couple other players, but Tulane came out, they put up 46 on them, so I had to put them at a nice spot in the top 10 for winning that game. And rounding out the top 10, we have Florida State. The reason I didn't put Florida State above Tulane is because they only beat Oklahoma by 3 points, I think. And Oklahoma was just trash this year. They were god awful. They probably shouldn't have even made a bowl game with how they were playing. So Florida State had no business being that close in a game with them. Moving on to another team that kind of disappointed, Oregon. I have Oregon sitting at the 11th spot. They really didn't move much. They only beat the Tar Heels by 1 point. And let's just say UNC is not that good. Like, they were a little overhyped. Drake May, he's a really good quarterback, and they do have Downs. Downs is a great receiver, but they don't play any defense at all. And for Oregon to only score 28 on them is kind of ridiculous. And honestly, North Carolina could have won this game, but Josh Downs had a terrible drop in the end zone. So I'm going to have to leave Oregon out of the top 10. They're at the 11th spot. And then USC right below them, I decided to put them at the 12th spot. I think their loss was a little bit better than Clemson's because they kind of got blown out by Tennessee. So Clemson's going to be at the 13th spot. LSU, they beat the brakes off of Purdue. They won 63-7, which is absolutely insane. It's almost as insane as Georgia beating TCU 65-7. So they're in my top 15. And then rounding out the top 15, I have Oregon State. Oregon State, they played a miserable Florida team that didn't have their starting quarterback. That was sitting out other teams, so I couldn't put them higher, but I am really proud of the Beavers. The Beavers played very well this season, and this was a great year for them. Next behind them, I had Kansas State. Kansas State, we all know, played Alabama. They did not play that good in that game. They scored a couple garbage time points, and it was 45-20, so they're sitting at 16th spot. And then I have Utah at the 17th spot after losing to Penn State by 14 in the Rose Bowl. And next we have a team of Notre Dame. Notre Dame, they beat South Carolina 45-38. So I moved them up a couple spots. They're going to be sitting at the 18th spot. And behind them we have Troy. Troy, 12-2 this year, and they beat UTSA 18-12. Their defense is really good. Troy had a really good defense this year. Their offense, not really that good, but their defense, I can't stop talking about it. They deserve it. Being 12-2, that's amazing for them. They're in the top 20. And then rounding out the top 20, I have Fresno State. Fresno State put it on Washington State. They won that game, I think, like 29-6. Fresno State, like we were talking about, they've won like 9 straight games, 8 or 9 straight games coming into this. They just look completely different. Their defense is really good. Hainer as their quarterback, he's pretty good. Fresno State is a good team, and that's why I have them rounding out my top 20. Then moving on to my 21st spot, I got the Boise State Broncos. They're on a 5-game win streak, and they won their bowl against North Texas. I think it was 35-37, if I'm not mistaken. And honestly, this team is very underrated. I know they had a couple bad losses earlier, but they have some quality wins as well. So definitely an underrated team. After them, I have Mississippi State. Mississippi State, they beat Illinois 19-10 in their bowl game, and prayers for Mike Leach. I'm so sorry for everyone in the family. I'm sorry for those players. He was a really great guy, and this was a really great win for them to have going off of his tenure at Mississippi State. Rest in peace, my man. And then after Mississippi State, I have Pittsburgh. The only reason I decided to rank Pittsburgh is because they went to their bowl game and they beat UCLA. And they also ended the year with, I think, 4 or 5 wins in a row. So I do think that Pittsburgh deserves to be ranked in the final ranking. And I think that is the end of DTR being a UCLA finally after like 4 or 5 years. So Chip Kelly's going to have to do something to get his team going next year. And sitting right after Pitt, I have Air Force. Air Force, they blew out Baylor 30-15. I know Baylor wasn't that good this year, but Air Force running the ball, they are just ridiculous. They have, I think they won 10 games this year. They were 10-3. And I definitely think that they deserve to be in the top 25 after that kind of win when everyone was kind of doubting them. So they're going to sit at the 24th spot. And the 25th spot, I'm leaving UCLA. I didn't see anyone else that I wanted to put in the top 25. UCLA has been a good team all year. They do have quality wins. They do have 4 losses. but I do think that they deserve to be ranked over like Texas, North Carolina State, South Carolina, and teams like that, because all those teams have 5 losses and UCLA only has 4. So they're going to round out my top 25. And guys, this has been my top 25. I'm going to come out with one more prediction, and that's going to be for the preseason poll next year. Depending on what happens in the offseason, that video might come soon, it might come later. Depends on all the NIL stuff and any transfers that I see that are big. There's a lot of news swirling around. So hopefully you guys liked my videos and you enjoyed. By the time I was around, I know I was very busy for most of it. I didn't get to upload the most that I wanted to, but I'm going to try to maximize that in the offseason and talk a lot more about recruiting and player stories and stuff like that, how NIL is affecting the sport and what they can do to combat it. So if you guys want to see those videos, just let me know in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.